City of Stevens Point Police and Fire Commission meeting, recorded February 5, 2019.
All right, I have 4 o'clock. I will call to order the February 5th meeting of the Stevens Point Police and Fire Commission. I certainly hope Commissioner Carlson and Ostrowski will be joining us shortly. Oh, hi, guys.
We're talking about the Super Bowl.
Oh, was there one recently?
Awful long conversation.
Leanne, would you call the roll, please?
Carlson?
Here.
Kirschling?
Here.
Moore? Here. Ostrowski?
Here.
And Westcott.
Here. Commissioners, I will spend just a moment, as you notice in the President's report, an update on the administrative procedures of the Stevens Point Police and Fire Commission. I'm going to ask Leanne to hand out to you the working document for you to review. Now, in the packet, some of you will remember we spent a long time as a commission going through the administrative procedures of this commission chapter by chapter, making editorial updates, updates to the process, to the procedures. We sought input from the city attorney on several occasions. What you have in front of you now, and Leanne maybe can speak a little bit more to this than I can, as you scroll through this, you're going to find the current policy. You're going to find the revisions and work that have been built into the update that the commission has chapter by chapter gone through. And then I think the last part you will find are the recommendations that the city attorney would like us to consider incorporating into the document. As I reviewed a number of things, it became very clear that we have administrative procedures for the Police and Fire Commission that simply haven't been updated or adopted formally. So here's my goal, and I'm going to see if Leanne wants to add anything to this. I'd like you to spend the next 30 days go through this. It's self-explanatory. We can either do this as part of our regular March meeting, or if you have so many different changes or concerns about language you're reading, I think many of you may remember that we held a number of special meetings where we just kind of went through this chapter by chapter, but we need to build in the editorial updates. We need to build in what the city attorney has recommended. There's, 14 or 15 different areas the city attorney has provided a legal commentary on. If we feel we can do that as part of our regular March meeting, we'll do it then. If between now and, say, a couple of days in front of the March meeting, you're feeling, there is so much here, then I guess I would look at a special meeting in March. But my goal is to formally adopt these in March. Okay? Lynn, you want anything to that?
No, just the city attorney is going to also review it too,
Okay.
just to make sure the changes are still what he does suggest, so.
Right.
Will his changes be done before our meeting, or his suggestions?
Well, you already have some. He's going back through it one more time.
Okay.
If he has additional input, he will need to get that to us prior to March meeting.
Okay.
Right. Our goal is to give the commissioners plenty of time to take a look at everything that we've agreed to, the recommendations that come from the city attorney's office, and then basically build them into a final document. Okay? Any questions?
Edits and everything on this, that if we find something, contact you?
I would contact Leanne. I think from a commission point, you're going to see that on document 2, most of it already reflects the work the commission has done, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It reflects our editorial input over the months and months that we worked on this. What we really have added to this is the city attorney's work. Okay? So take a look at it, spend some time, with it the next few weeks, and then we'll decide, okay, we'll either do it at the regular March Police and Fire Commission meeting, or we'll take a look and do it at a special meeting in March, okay? All right. With that said, let's move to item number 3. That would be the approval of the minutes from January the 8th. Commissioners, you have the bills in front of you. Commissioner Ostrowski, you get the first kick at this.
Alrighty. Taking the police department first. While the amount is a little bit up from normal, there is one very large item in there that I point out, the one for $19,328. That's a records management system It's an annual fee. That's our system that handles the entire police network, and that's what jumps it up. There is some significant items in there also due to the training for a detective, and also, let's see, the training for 3 other officers, which add to this month's bills out of the ordinary. Overall, when you look at the budget amount, however, for the first month, they are under the suggested budget. Any questions on the police department one?
Yes, I have a question. Chief Skibba, what is that training that Officer or Detective Lorink went to? I wasn't familiar with it when I saw it.
So with the recent promotion of currently Sergeant Williams now, some of those forensic positions with in the Investigation Bureau have been spread out, recognizing that some of it fits better in sensitive crimes, some of it in general crimes, and so we are kind of spreading some of that. So when we have a promotion or a movement, we don't see such a loss as we did with Officer Williams moving out of the department through the promotion.
Okay.
And he is one of those taking up one of those positions.
So more of the computer aspect?
Correct.
Okay, all
That
right,
particular
yep.
thing, I'm sorry, is
Okay.
regarding computer
All
forensics.
right, thank you.
Okay. Robert?
Okay, then any other questions on the police? If not, I'll move on to the fire. Okay, and on the fire department, again, rather substantial amount, but if you look, items 1 and 2 will be self-explanatory. A large amount of that is on the uniform allowance, which represents about 35% of that month's bills. Also, if you notice that there's a new column added on the last part, that is to explain when charges are split between 2 different accounts. It's not a duplication of bills, but the one bill is prorated over a couple different codes in the department itself. There again, we did have some new expenses, like a computer for the fire marshal. And let's see, we had some licensing fees which added to this month's bills. Other than that, I see no questions unless any of my fellow.
Any questions for Commissioner Ostrowski or the fire chief? Chief, anything you want to add? No? All right, I will move approval of the bills as submitted to the Police and Fire Commission.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Ostrowski. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. I want to move back to the approval of the minutes for January the 8th. Members of the Police and Fire Commission, you have the minutes as documented by Leanne for our January 8th meeting. Any thoughts, comments,
Move to
editorial?
approve.
We have a motion to approve. Second. Second by Commissioner Moore. All in favor of adopting the minutes as they are submitted to the commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 5 is the promotion of Christy Ahrens to the position of corporal. Chief Skibba, you have the floor. Christy?
Most of you are very familiar with Officer Arn's work within the new position that actually was created because a lot of her passion to deal with those suffering of mental illness and law enforcement coming in contact with them. However, Officer Arns has been with the police department since 1999, serving in a variety of roles to include working within our records division. And again, most recently as our CIT officer, however, previously as a patrol officer, she also held a position of a supervisor there in various roles. We are very fortunate and happy to have the opening of corporal and looking forward to the many years that she's going to serve and supervise in our department. So with that said, congratulations.
All right, with that said, I will move to approve the promotion as it's submitted to the commission.
I'll second it.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Well, say no. Christy, congratulations. Come over here. Or did you want to give us a speech?
I wanted to
should've
hear,
asked.
I wanted to hear a speech.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I really am disappointed there's no speech.
If you would like to,
Deserved, and I can't believe it's been 20 years. Unbelievable. Nice story. Good job.
Christy, did you want to say anything?
Yes, she does. I thought you were saying you wanted to talk.
She's saving it for the
Thank
thing
you very
tomorrow.
much.
All right, well deserved.
Well deserved, well done, congratulations. All right, with that being said, we'll move to item 6, is the fire chief and EMS.
Mr. President.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
If you don't mind me saying that whoever fills Christie's shoes has got big shoes to fill, working with her in mental health and suicide prevention, what she's done for the police department, this community should be commended. And I don't know who's taking her spot, but they got some pretty big shoes to fill.
Well, that's one of the questions I'm going to ask Chief Skibbo when we get to his report in a couple of minutes.
Sorry.
All right,
Nice job.
congratulations. Chief Finn, you have the floor.
First of all, EMS negotiations with the county will resume on Friday for the ambulance. Other than that, there's the city's team been working diligently behind the scenes to try to accomplish something. I would like to thank this commission and then the city council also for allowing us to get the position of fire marshal. Fire Marshal Egan has proven his worth in the first month. Is like, how do we do this? When you get someone in a new position, you kind of figure out, how do we do this without him?
Yeah.
And what's come across his desk, as Assistant Chief Moody can attest to, he's been a big help in taking some of the stuff off his desk and allowing him to do fire department operations. It doesn't always show in the report, but that position is fully functional and operational and extremely busy. As in your report, the extrication equipment that we received with that $78,000 grant, all the training has been completed. It has been put on Tower 2 and Engine 1, both are frontline pieces of equipment. When we had an accident, when someone trapped in a car before, we relied on Plover and Hall to bring extrication equipment, and we had to wait for them to get there. We no longer have to do that. We can now extricate the patient from the car, so it's a better service to the community. Other than that, pretty much everything else is in the report. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Chief, let's go back to the fire marshal. I was pleased to hear you say that it was one of those positions that after it was created, it was one of those, how did we get along without the position? What were some of the surprise takeaways that you and your staff had? The fire marshal is up and running, the position's operationalized, and you're a week or 2, 3 weeks in, and all of a sudden it's like, what was that wow moment?
The wow moment is he's already updated all our codes for everyone to use. He's gotten some inspections out to each lieutenant, because they still have to do some in the beginning. I think he's done about over 80 inspections himself. Plus, he's worked with the building department, the inspection department, the code enforcement officer on various issues. And just day-to-day questions that come up regarding fire prevention, he's taken off Chief Moody's desk. There's been, due to the cold weather, there's been quite a few sprinkler systems that have frozen and the pipes have broken, and where Chief Moody would have follow-up the next day with that business, the fire marshal's now able to say, yes, you can open, and this is what has to be done. I'll probably, if this keeps going the way it is, I'll be back for you next year to try to get someone in to work underneath them and make it a real fire prevention bureau.
Anything new on the request that you had in front of the city for additional firefighters in the future on a grant?
No, Lieutenant Briggs has met with Chief Moody. We're in the process of writing it, but nothing from the federal government. During the shutdown, all that, there was no, FEMA was not giving out any information on that. So that could come out at any time next week, or it could come out 6 months from now. It all depends on FEMA.
What's our timeline on that again?
Once it's written and sent in, it could take the feds, it could take FEMA anywhere from 4 to 6 months to review it. If we're lucky enough to receive it, then we have 6 months to use that funding.
Okay. All right, the last question I have, for I check with my colleagues, with that terribly, terribly cold weather last week, did it present any unique challenges that we faced last week?
Anytime you get the extreme cold, actually, we put on the fire department's Facebook page the new furnaces. They vent out the side of the house. Well, that condensation built up ice. And we had one CO call and one natural gas smell, and it was because the ice built up backed up and blocked the exhaust. When I read the article, I had talked to Chief Moody, and Chief Moody already knew about it. I went home at lunch and checked mine. I had an icicle this big on mine, and it was open, but I had a 2-foot icicle on my house. So we got that word out, and hopefully that helped the residents. And, you know, as always, just with the upcoming snowstorm, always telling people, check on your neighbors and stuff like that. But the most unique thing was when the pipe sprinkler systems froze, then they cracked the pipes. If they didn't crack when they froze, once they start thawing, they cracked.
Sure.
And it did a lot of, some substantial water damage to some businesses.
Other questions?
One of them was a college hall.
Yeah, it was. Commissioner Ostrowski?
Bob, by the way, I had 2 of those icicles on mine, never had them before in my life. They were the size of the exterior
Yes.
pipe coming down.
Yep.
One of them formed in 72 hours, which amazed me. But what I was wondering about with the fire marshal, obviously a vehicle is important for him. Are you doing some sort of shared vehicle of some sort for him?
Right now, he is using the brush truck. We are getting I'm getting a new vehicle sometime in August or September. Chief Moody will take my car, the fire marshal will take Chief Moody's car. So we will have the fleet.
All right, are there other questions from the commissioners?
Also, just so you know, during the last big snowstorm, and if we get what they're saying on Thursday, we hire back personnel. We send out the brush truck on every ambulance call and every fire call. And the brush truck will go out in the city and in the county to plow driveways, roads that are impassable in the county, so the ambulance can get people in and out of their house safely.
Okay.
So you plow our driveway? I'm sorry.
No
right.
comment.
Don't forget
The
to carry
camera's
your
on.
fire hydrants.
All right, does anyone else, any other commissioners have questions for Chief Finn? If not, I will move approval of the fire chief's report, including the EMS report for January.
I'll second it.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 7, police chief's report. Let's start with the obvious. Who will be taking over Christie's spot, chief?
So the position has been filled. We wound up actually tapping the resources of one of our prior school liaison officers who probably sits in a position very close to what Officer Arns was doing at the junior high level, where they are dealing with health and human services. They're dealing less from a law enforcement specific situation, but more of a mediator and providing resources for people who are struggling and are having some difficult times. And so far anyway, it seems to be a very good fit, but that would be Officer Mike Radzik, who now is taking over that role. And so far doing a very good job is what I am being told.
Okay.
Regarding the report, note of interest, I will point that many times when we talk about drug issues, we're thinking primarily the adult user and the things that are going on there. The case that I want to shed some light on in a public forum, we had an overdose death where 3 adults were involved, where they were consuming drugs within a vehicle. They also had a 4-year-old child in that vehicle, who afterwards, in checking medically, had also tested for having meth within their system. It's a issue that we are contending within our community. Part of the issue is that just the sheer amount that is being brought into any community, whether it's Stevens Point, Wausau, Wisconsin Rapids, we're all facing the issue. We're working as collaboratively as we can, but I think some of it is just making the community aware that it's out there, and if you are seeing something, you need to call us. If it turns out to be nothing, you know what, that's great. That's absolutely great. But if it's suspicious and is catching your eye, give us a call, let us check it out. The sooner we can engage and get people help, the better. That would be the first topic that I wanted to bring up. Secondly, as we continue working with the city, we did receive capital monies to do some improvements on the building. One of them is to roof part of this structure, re-roof it, I should say. Some of it is to do some internal structure work. Our architecture that we have been working with has submitted the paperwork down to the state for approval on those internal workings, some interview room area, some decontamination shower area, and so we'll be moving forward with that as we progress with the state approvals.
forward, have you established a timeline for that this year?
So we are looking at late February for the state to get its initial review. We are hoping within a month or two from that we will be able to start the work there. Some of it is external, potentially depending on how many dollars we have to use based on what the actual bids come in. And so we do need to go to Plan Commission for a review because of the external. The internal stuff, Plan Commission does nothing with, but the external, which would be putting some windows into the structure. So I would say within a few months, we should start doing some internal work and hopefully move forward. But again, depending on the final bid on some of the structure, because it has to do with plumbing and electric, and depending on how that comes in, makes a big difference on whether or not we can do some other internal walls.
Okay.
So that would be regarding that. And then, again, as the staffing on the second page, again, addressing the fact that Corporal Brooks did move from patrol into the investigation bureau. As you've seen already under our budget, there is going to be some additional money spent this year on training. In past years, to get more officers to specialized training, we rotated people through our investigation bureau more frequently. We have slowed that down in looking at where the officers are in their career and what benefits, obviously, a long-term, more educated contacts that they have in that area, that niche. So in some ways, yes, we're spending money up front to train Corporal Brooks. On the other hand, the longer he stays there, the more bang for our buck we get as we do that. Again, Officer Arns being promoted to a supervisor, going to patrol. We are starting to do our background checks on our new hiring process. Again, as a reminder, we are looking to bring our applicant to the March Police and Fire Commission for review and approval of hiring, hopefully. And that would be the bulk of things that are going on. Though I don't think we're hopefully going to get any more super cold spells, I will just to let the commission know, they may have seen some of our officers in a little bit of gear outside of our standard issued gear. We did relax, if you will, our clothing exterior gear requirements during those coldest of days because it's not appropriate to gear every officer for 30 and 40 degree below weather and have that sit in lockers for a year on end, but what officers needed to, protect themselves. So they donned some gear that typically would not be worn by law enforcement on typical traffic stops, but, so that would be it.
Does it slow down when it gets that cold? I mean, are you reading articles around the country about, quiet police calls, not as busy? Is that, I would imagine, is typical
yes,
here, too?
our calls for service will slow down a little bit because there isn't as much traffic. As you're aware, there was an article because one of the days being so cold, we actually, though all of our employees did come to work, we actually closed our window one day because we did not want to encourage people coming and driving that particular day. Sure. And quite frankly, the bulk of your lower level criminal element is kind of a lazy element too. And they don't want to get too cold. So there is a benefit to very cold weather.
Oh, I'm not even going there. Thank you. Just totally lost what I was going to ask you next on that one. Are there other questions for the chief while I try and remember what I wanted to ask him? Commissioner Ostrowski, you have the floor,
Chief,
sir.
just one thing that's on my mind is the fact that we've been going through officers and we're trying to expand. Are we facing any retirements in the near future?
We are not.
Thank you.
That's not to say again, though, again, we had 5 individuals that we had to replace last year. One was a scheduled retirement. More and more agencies are creating lateral transfer programs to entice other officers. I believe our agency is large enough to retain the bulk of its employees, and we will continue to strive to develop programs, resources to reach out and maintain and retain our staff.
Good, thank you.
Okay, would you walk me through again, walk the commission through again, the city council personnel committee deferred action on hiring a drug officer or additional officers in 2019. Where do we stand as far as implementing a hiring for 20 or 21? I don't remember where we left this.
So a couple things did occur towards the end of last year. However, as it ended, what the police department was left with was this, that myself, the city treasurer, and the mayor would, as the year progresses, look at what funding we have within our budget, and if there is the possibility of hiring the approved position, which the council has approved us to hire a 45th officer, which would bring us back to the number we had in the early 2000s. They already had passed a ordinance, again with this commission's approval, to actually allow us the authority to have up to 49 sworn personnel. So through the course of the year, we will continue to monitor our budget and see if there is a way that we can hire an officer. Ideally, if we could hire that officer within the last 3 months of this year, it would allow us to get them through the field training process, so truly in 2020, they would actually hit the ground running. With that said, the proposal citywide, including the fire department and other departments, had presented to council with their overall approval, though not a vote, I believe, but overall approval of law enforcement seeing 2 hires potentially in 2020 as funding is provided, along with 1 or 3 firefighters based on grant approval and the approval of that, and then kind of prioritize through the departments after that for 2020, and then 2021 and 22,
All
respectively.
right, so based on the way you've outlined that, if you're basically talking hiring early if the funding can be identified in 2019.
That would be correct.
Right, if the funding is not available in 2019, would that drug officer then be one of the 2 hires anticipated for 2020 then?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions for the chief? Thank you, Chief.
I'm just going to throw in 2 cents here. I think when you talk about meth, I know 4 or 5 years ago, heroin was the in drug in Portage County. I think meth has bypassed that now, and we have some media here today. But I think you need to educate the community what meth is, where it is. I mean, aside from seeing pictures of Joe Schmo arrested for possession of meth, I think we need stories about meth and the epidemic that's sweeping, like you said, not only Stevens Point, but this entire state. Meth is ruling this state, and it's growing. It's not shrinking, it's growing. And I think that goes hand in hand with adding that drug officer position. So whoever works with the media, let's get some stories about meth and how it's affecting not just those people, but all the people, one way or another in this county.
Commissioner, why is it growing so exponentially faster than others?
Availability, price, I don't know.
Chief?
And it's highly addictive, so the person that may have bought just a little bit before, now because of the availability, he buys a little bit more, shares a little bit. It's just easier to expand the user group, if you will. If I may speak to Commissioner Carlson's point, there is a group through Portage County, AODA, and that group actually has a open full meeting. This month is going to be February 19th, and that is going to be at the county annex, where they will be discussing more heavily meth use. Secondly, they are actually sponsoring a viewing of a video and discussion to follow on February 26th at the university, and I believe the title of that is No Way Out. And so working with the university, working with Human Services, definitely trying to get that message out, but thank you for reminding me, Commissioner Carlson.
No, I always just think that the first step in solving a problem is get people talking about the problem.
I would
The more
agree.
we can, the better.
Are there other questions for Chief Skiba?
Oh, what is WSTA conference? I was curious about that.
And when I looked at that, I abbreviated in this and of course.
I'm sorry to ask you,
no.
but it struck me, I didn't know what it was, and I was just curious. If you don't know, that's okay too.
Unfortunately, it's escaping me, though I want to say,
It's a radio station in Seattle.
Traffic
Yeah.
Association was that?
All right.
I will get back to you on that. I
Yeah,
apologize.
and I'll Google it or something too. I was just curious. Sorry.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve Chief Skibben's report.
I'll second it.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, approve. Thank you, Joe.
Skibben's
All in
report.
favor of approving the report?
I
As
missed it. I was
submitted,
still
please say
thinking
aye. Good cover, Joseph.
Thank you.
That was good.
All right, item 8, we'll adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute, section 1985 IE, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require closed session for an update on EMS ambulance contract negotiations, and pursuant to Wisconsin statute 1985 1C, considering the employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee of which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility for a fighter, paramedic applicant interview. I will make such a motion.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Ostrowski. Would you call the roll, please?
Carlson?
Yes.
Kirschling?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Ostrowski?
Yes.
And Westcott?
Yes. All right, we are in closed session.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.